What's up, everybody? Um, Share, like, subscribe, smash that mother effer. You know how it works. Um, Thought I'd get a video uploaded today before UFC starts. Up here in Indiana, man, that weather is beginning to kind of get bad. I went out earlier today at around like maybe I think it was about noon, I think it was, and I went to go get stocked up on stuff at my local grocery. And at least at the time, it wasn't really that bad. I mean, it's colder than hell. I mean, it's freaking winter, so I think I think a lot of these freaking news outlets, man, they're really getting people riled up because at least yesterday. Because see, my daily routine, man, I usually hit up at least one grocery store per day. I don't like stock up. I'm not one of those people that stocks up on groceries, and whenever I get out and stuff, it helps me just kind of get away from things like, get outside, smell the fresh air, see stuff, get out of the house, whatever. And yesterday after work, I popped in to a different grocery store to get some stuff, and oh my god, man, people were nuts. I mean, just, I don't know if it's like panic buying or what, but the majority of people that were in there, they were just like old people, people walking around slowly pushing their carts and stuff, and none of them were like necessarily acting like they were anxious, but you could kind of feel a little bit of the anxiety in them whenever you look at them and you'd see what they were doing, and messing around picking that stuff on the shelf or whatever. I mean, you could just feel that there's a little bit of a tenseness in them, and none of them were very friendly. They seemed like they were like occupied with whatever it was that they were focusing on. It wasn't, in other words, it wasn't some sort of like just leisurely visit to the local grocery store for some whatever. You could just tell that people were tense. And I went into a different grocery store today, to kind of get stocked up on some things. I wanted to get some more drinks and some stuff for sushi, because I'm gonna make some sushi later after this video. And while I was just kind of sitting around watching people and stuff, it was kind of the same thing a little bit. I mean, and it was crazy because the first thing I saw whenever I went into the grocery store, back by the milk, normal milk was just completely fucking gone. I mean, I can't help but laugh at this shit, man, because up here in Indiana, man, this shit is nothing. We have at least one bad storm per year whenever it comes around with winter. Usually we wind up with about two. One like in the early onset of winter, and then one last one near the last leg. And that, I think, is what we're going through right now. Excuse me. So I mean, none of it is necessarily new, and to see people like almost doing what I felt they did back whenever COVID and all that lockdown shit was going down. I mean, it just makes you wonder how much progress we're making as a society. I mean, I don't know. I just got my shit and got out of there as quickly as I could, man. And usually, whenever I shop, I have like headphones on with my MP3 player so that I just don't have to even look at people, man. And I absolutely hate being that way, because I am not an antisocial person. I mean, I know that I'm, on here sometimes making these stupid little Rimworld videos or whatever, and I do that shit to kind of like turn my mind off, to stuff. Because whenever you're like living on your own and stuff, you gotta find ways to kind of use your time and shit. And I mean, I do perfectly fine with that stuff, but it's like almost as if I've got to turn myself off sometimes to the world that I'm in, that I already resort to turn myself off from the real world. Because whenever you're not playing things like games or whatever, half the time you're on the internet, seeing news stories and stuff. Like right now, for example, I don't know if any of you guys follow this person. It's the Agenda Free TV YouTube channel, and it's this guy named Steve. He to his credit, man, I don't know really what his situation is or whatever, but to his credit, man, he is always on on top of whatever it is that's going on in the world. And I don't know when he started his stream today, but he's been covering this latest Minneapolis shooting that I guess went down today. And I mean, my God, man, it's like every freaking minute there is some sort of shit that's going on in the world, and 9 times out of 10, it's usually something that's going to wind up making you kind of depressed or anxious or fucking whatever, man. And especially where this weather is concerned, it's like, I'm 42 fucking years old, man. I've been in Indiana my entire life, and to see people getting riled up over what is more than likely going to be something between maybe 8 to 10 inches worth of snow in Indiana, it's just baffling. I mean, it was really baffling. Now further down in the South, Tennessee, Kentucky, some northern areas of, I guess, Georgia and Alabama, some of those places down there, you can at least somewhat understand the reaction to this thing that's moving across the country, because those people aren't really used to this type of stuff. Most of them aren't, at least. I know that my father, he was working in Alabama years ago, and one thing that he would always get a kick out of, because he was obviously from Indiana, is that whenever they would see any kind of snow, like a half an inch to an inch worth of snow, he would always talk and laugh about how everyone down there would get all panicky and act almost as if they would act like what I saw today and yesterday with these people getting in the grocery stores and panicking and stuff. And I've got a buddy right now that's living down in Georgia. He sometimes kind of says the same sort of stuff, and I mean, I don't know, to everyone's defense, again, when you're in those areas and stuff, and you haven't seen snow as much as us Yankees up here in the north and everything, I suppose you would wind up kind of getting a little anxious and feel a little panic or whatever about it. But I guess the point that I'm trying to make here is that you've got all this shit that's going on, man. The protests, the stuff that's going on with these other countries, the weather, things with costs and everything, and with me, I mean, I don't have much of a social life, despite the fact that I said earlier that I'm not an antisocial person or whatever, because I'm not. But it's just gotten to a point in my 42 years of life where, despite the fact that I'm not antisocial, I think I try to be antisocial simply to avoid people and all of these kinds of things that are going on. And it sucks for me, because whenever I'm in that kind of situation, my outlet is usually just hanging out on the internet, watching some of my stuff that I've got on my hard drives, or my shows that I stream. And it's like, sometimes, man, you can't even escape the stuff that's going on when you're doing that stuff. Especially for YouTubers that have things like sponsors and stuff like that. They've got these commercials that sometimes talk about, I mean, most of us have probably seen Tim Pool, and I know that Tim Pool's got some sponsors, or at least does commercials for things about, whether it be stuff related to gold or stuff related to, like, these survival kits and shit. So it's like, my God, man. And I think that's the reason that I play these dumb games, or at least with Rimworld, because it helps me sometimes forget about all this kind of mess. And by the way, I was actually going to try to get involved with making a stream or a series about Skyrim, because I really love Skyrim. In my opinion, it's one of the best games that's ever been created. But unfortunately, my stupid NVIDIA card, I guess, has a latest driver that seems to be incompatible with Skyrim, I guess. And whenever you make it to the start menu, it just exits. Talk about quality, Jesus Christ. So anyway, one of these days I'll try to get that fixed and, change things up a little bit from Rimworld to either Skyrim or, I don't know, man, something else. So anyway, sorry for wasting time on that. I just had to get that off my chest. People are fucking nuts, man. Okay, so where are we here? So last time we left off with, well, we didn't really do a whole lot, man. I mean, I'm still trying to get this southernmost wing, growing basin wing, created. Because as I've told you before, I've got these different growing basin wings that I use to try to essentially make my food production access symmetrical with this overall type of base design. Because if you make, you know, the idea at least that I've had in doing it like this was that I would make these wings close to the kitchen areas in the refrigerators and stuff in the lobby area. And I guess the thought was that I would make it to where it would make it easier to kind of access the plants or the rice, put it up in the fridge, cook it, blah blah blah, because it kind of saves a lot of time or a lot of foot traffic that way. And it has kind of resulted in that type of outcome. But the thing is that it takes a long time sometimes to create, primarily because of these stupid slate tiles. And the only reason it's like that, I think, for me, is because the main actually, I think this might actually well, no, I guess I've got, no, that's a wooden art bench. um the only block type of production building that I have is down here, because I've got 4 of these right here, and I've got 2 deep drills right now that are drilling for slate. So it takes a long time for me to generate the slate blocks, and it's my it's my understanding that with stone cutter tables you have to have a minimum of like level 3, I think, of crafting. I don't know if that's right or not. I think that's what I've read though. So not everybody and their brother can just come in here and do this type of stuff like they can with some of these other types of buildings and whatnot. So anyway, at least as far as my base is concerned, that's one reason that it's taken as long as it is to do all this shit. And then of course, once you get done building those blocks, you've got to either go over here when they happen to drop them right here, or else go all the way over here to this block storage place that I have, and then haul them all the way up there, and then do all the stuff. So that's kind of what's going on right now with that. But once I get done with that, though, it's going to be, I think, a little better as far as food stores are concerned, because then at that point we're going to start generating a hell of a lot of rice and everything, and I don't know, man, just kind of go from there. Excuse me. I think I'm still kind of getting over a little bit of a cold too. Last month I was basically on vacation, and I think I wound up catching that stupid super bug or whatever the fucking thing is that's going across the entire country. And I was probably sick for about my first week of vacation. And then after that, everything began to kind of get better, but I've never really completely gotten over the whole, like mucus congestion, sinus type crap. It's better than it was, but it's still not completely up to snuff. So sometimes I have to cough and everything because it just kind of gets irritated, I think, in my throat. Another thing too is that once I get done with the southern wing, I'm gonna start working again on summoning those bad guy mechs, the Apocrycons or whatever they're called, and start trying my best to keep working on those atomizers. I think right now I have about 3 of them, but it's nowhere near close to being enough to where I no longer have to start jettisoning these stupid toxic waste packs out in the ether. And I still haven't had any raids yet to take any captives so that I can sacrifice them to the rip scanner. So I really, really, really want to start making some of those stupid fabric wars, but I can't do that until I start using the rip scanner stuff. But one thing I've noticed about Rimworld, the further along you get into the later part of your colony's development, is a couple stuff. One, those bulk traders, the orbital bulk traders, they almost never come around. I cannot even remember the last time I had one that was in orbit. I think in game years, I think now it's been at least 10, no less. So there is definitely, I don't know if you would call it a bug, or if maybe it might be some sort of game mechanic that tries to balance out the success of your colony with, giving you those traders. Because whenever you get those traders in orbit and stuff, it goes without saying that it's a massive help to your colony, because then at that point you can just offload things like look at all this textile shit that I've got, or the fabrics and whatnot. I mean, my God, I don't know how much I have, but it's insane. And it also goes without saying that I've got a shit ton of this kin fuel too. So it would be awesome to be able to kind of sell some of this stuff and load up on other things. But and I know that if I was like a game designer trying to somehow find a way to balance out the advantages of a bulk orbital trader with your own colony's development capabilities, that would be one way that I would try to do it, is try to limit or try to like create like a staggered type of effect where early in game the frequency of visits is like up here, and then earlier or later on in the game, whenever your colony's making as much stuff as I'm making, it goes like all the way down, something kind of like that, like a staggered type of model like that, because then at that point you're kind of balancing certain kinds of things. But I don't know if that's really what's going on or not. But anyway, that's one thing. And then the other thing too, when the further along you get with your colony, that I've noticed is that you get fewer and fewer of those ancient complex missions where you either get the that health serum stuff, or else the missions that are centered around getting a mechanator created. Where you go and extract the mechanator chip or whatever it is from the dead corpse. So I don't know, man. And again, if I was a game designer, that to me would make sense, because then that would kind of imply that something's been done with an algo somewhere in the code that makes you believe that it's intentional, because that would kind of balance out certain kinds of advantages and disadvantages of gameplay. Now, I've done research on that, doing some searches and stuff on Google, and supposedly there's nothing in the code, or I guess, or at least nobody said anything about how there's anything officially that's been done like that. But one thing I have seen is that there's other people out there that have noticed that. So take it for whatever you will. But all that being said, I hope you guys are staying warm. I know that with me, one reason I went out today to get some groceries, despite the fact that I didn't technically need much. A, I wanted to get out just for the sake of getting out, but B, I also I wanted to get out to make sure that if I didn't need to get out tomorrow or Monday, that I'd be completely stocked up. And honestly, man, I don't know if my place of employment is even going to be operational on Monday. They might just close up shop for that day. I've told myself, though, that if it's really bad outside, I'm just going to call in sick and stay home. No point in, like, risking your life whenever it's really bad like that. Kind of reminds me of one time, a couple of years ago, I did something a little dumb. I made another grocery trip when I shouldn't have. The roads on this day really were bad. I mean, they were, like, so bad to the point where we had people, like, going like 5 miles per hour on the road, and in their defense, I didn't really blame them, because I have two vehicles. One's a little car, and then the other one's a truck. And the truck doesn't have 4-wheel drive or anything, but I mean, with me being an Indiana boy, I can handle bad roads most of the time. And after 42 years of life on Earth, this one particular day, it kind of shook me a little bit, because I saw how bad the roads were. I mean, it was at the point where you really kind of had to be pretty damn slow to avoid any kind of fishtailing or anything like that. You don't really see roads get that bad up here. I mean, they can get pretty bad depending on what all is going on, especially with freezing rain. And I think that's really what happened in this particular situation. The temperature was just right to where whenever the freezing rain did fall, it almost froze immediately. Well, anyway, that day, I decided to go and make a quick grocery run, just like I normally do. And when I was like maybe, I don't know, man, like a half a mile away from the grocery store, I was on one of the main highways. And right as I was getting in front of the grocery store, it was probably I'd say maybe 50 yards from the stoplight. It was a dual. It was like a dual one way road where I was, or street, and then it was like one of those streets where it begins to kind of turn into a 3 lane road, because in this lane is where you turn off to get into the grocery store. And so I was in the middle lane, about to get into that left turn lane, when all of a sudden this this Crown Vic in the right lane, he literally did a 360 turn in the road. And I swear to God, it was like something you would see on Fast and Furious, where as soon as he gets done doing the circle 360, he lines up straight, and he stops right when the light turns red. And I never will forget that, man, because I mean, him and I weren't the only people on the road. I mean, I think if I remember right, there was at least 2 or 3 people uh, behind both him and I. And I just couldn't help but kind of cheer for the guy, because it was kind of cool to see it happen, you know. But that was a really really bad day. Let me see here. Quick sleeper, slothful. I hate it when this thing gives you like options to choose, which all suck. Quick sleeper is actually not that bad, I guess, but I don't understand why anybody would want to pick slothful. Yeah, I don't get that. But in any event, we're gonna pick quick sleeper. Uh, but that day, man, that was kind of a scary day, because after getting to the grocery store and realizing what was going on the road, I realized how stupid it was for me to make a trip out there, because that was another one of those kinds of days, you know, where I didn't really have to get out and get anything. Let's see here. See if I can find that person that we just. Okay. I can't remember who it was that we clicked on, that we messed with. Oh well. Uh, let's see here. Schedule. Alright, here he is. Yeah. Alright, that's him. Let's do that. Now, to give you some context here with this, excuse me. The people that. Okay, so as you can see here, let me fix this too before I explain stuff. I didn't realize I forgot about doing this. Okay, so the people that have this schedule, these are my normal day workers, and the people that have this different kind of schedule are the night owls. And I have a pretty good amount of them too, as you can see. And it's kind of cool doing it this way, because it gives a little bit of a complete coverage between night and day. That way everything's as productive as possible. To give you some context here with these zones, the big zone that I have that I usually assign everyone to as a default is this thing that I call Ag Detail. And that essentially covers the entire property of the base. And then from there you have certain kinds of specializations, like the stonework and mining detail, which at least was initially designed to focus on things like deep drilling and stonework. It's through time it's kind of bled over into a few little things here and there, but it's mostly centered on that. And then I have my cooking detail, which I assign all of my chefs to. That way they're full-time cooks. And besides that, food crop detail, which, if I remember right, is kind of like the ag stuff, except I think it's mostly geared towards bots or the mechs. The same thing for the toxic loading detail. And, cooking cleaner bot zone, as you can imagine. and this one too. This one in particular is pretty important for bots because I put a lot of lifters on this zone. It's what I refer to as the external field and fuel bot zone. And basically what that's for is for all of the bots to come out here to these boomalope pins, load up the food zones, and then also clean up the chem fuel that gets milked from the boomalopes and store them and stuff. For the most part though, that's and oh yeah, and I've got the workshop detail, which is for the things like the fabrication benches and stuff. And well, okay, so there's a boomalope feeding zone, an explicitly indicated boomalope feeding zone, and then there's the external stuff. The external field and fuel bot zone isn't just for the boomalopes, though. That's one thing. That's the caveat, I guess, because as you can see here, there's obviously the boomalope stuff, but I think if I remember right, there's a couple zones like this. I think that it. Well, okay. I don't know. It's I'm trying to remember. There's some caveats with that zone. I guess one being that the lifters that are assigned to it, they can go into the freezers that I sometimes use to store hay in. Go in there, pick up the hay, and then go out there to the boomalope pens and feed them. As to where with the other thing, I can't remember if that's the same thing or not. Okay, I see one difference. To start with, this one, the growing basins for the rice aren't included, as to where with the boomalope feeding bot zone that they are. So there's probably some ways that I could probably make those a little more efficient or consistent at least, or something. But the point is that I try to break up these certain kinds of tasks into their own respective zones. That way you can kind of maintain some level of efficiency. And at least with my base, it's especially important because these damn boomalopes, man, if you're not on top of them, they not only produce a shit ton of kin fuel that you have to find ways to kind of somehow find a way to organize, but they'll also begin to have problems with maintaining their health if you're not feeding them efficiently enough. And with my boomalope zones, I've got, I think, about 5 or 6 different feeding zones. Like, for example, here's one. I think, yeah, here's another. So I think what I try to do, if I remember right, is put one right here, and then like one like somewhere around here, and then down here, which I think is right here, and then one final one down here. And the idea is that it kind of spreads out the proximity of each zone or each of the boomalopes that inhabit that respective pin. That way they're not having to go all the way down to some location to find food, because what I've found in the past is that if you do that, it's like they starve themselves to death, because I guess they become either too lazy or too preoccupied in their own life, I guess, to not remember to go down there and eat at that spot. So you have to kind of spread out the feeding zones at equal distances throughout the pen, is what I'm trying to say. And for whatever it's worth, I know that this this chem fuel stuff, this concentration of chem fuel, that obviously represents a danger, and I've just tried to live with it, with the risk, because I know that that sucks, but on the same hand too, the only alternative is maybe finding ways to kind of spread it out throughout the entire colony. But then if you do that though, then you've got to try to find a way to make your lifter zone, you know, that much more complex and stuff, and I just didn't want to mess with it, man. I told myself that I'm just going to take the risk, and if it all blows up to hell, then maybe at best or at worst it will only be that one specific zone. And I've tried to kind of mitigate the possibility of that by making these fire foam poppers throughout the area, because there have been times, for example, when I would, and this was before I had everything kind of at least somewhat organized, the colonists would come out here to the boomalope zones or pins and milk those sons of bitches, but then they wouldn't take the freaking chem fuel to some place to store it. And what happened was is that you would see like this ocean of red in this entire fucking pin. And then of course there would be some fucking meteorite that would land on one of those things, and it would cause a complete domino effect of everything fucking exploding. And I know that if something like that happens again with this place, it can potentially happen again. Uh, but I've found that those foam poppers do help sometimes, at least with some of it. They're they're not perfect, but they mitigate a lot of it. And also too, with this particular chem fuel storage area, I think some of it's underneath a mountain, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right? Oh, okay. It's not under a mountain. This part is under a mountain, I guess, but it's at least behind plasteel. So if it does go boom, I think, or at least I'm hoping that the plasteel constrains most of it, the fallout and everything. As you can imagine, though, it's always a pain in the ass trying to deal with that type of stuff because you got to figure out these smart little creative ways to try to contain these kinds of things. And I've kind of thought about one day going back to these chem fuel storage places and doubling up the plasteel walls, because that kind of explosion would probably go through at least one wall without any problem. But I don't know if it would wind up doing that with two. Something in the future, though, that I might do at some point. What are these guys here? Oh, that's the combat. I traded with them, I think, in the last episode. Even with the ground bulk traders, those guys don't come around as often either. It's like you have to go out of your way to like summon trades, or go out of your way to be proactively traveling to places to do it. What a fight. Come on, guys. Stop fighting each other. When they do that crap, man. Someone's sword there. One thing I wish in this game you could do is permanently assign colonists a specific weapon. Because whenever they drop them, it's like you've got to go and store them, or at least find who it was that had the thing before they dropped it, and then reassign it back. And another fight. This stuff's almost non-stop sometimes. It's really annoying. And Sark gives a right. And Ayla gives a left. Well, that's easy on the eyes. Getting all this freaking hay. That's one thing I always used to struggle with, is generating enough freaking hay for all these boomalopes. But I think once we get done with the southern wing here, with all the growing bases and stuff, I think food production is never going to be a problem again. Not that it is now, but I think it's going to be a situation potentially where I no longer even have to hunt if I don't want to. Which is something I always try to keep an eye on with the wildlife thing down here. That helps supplement some of the stuff that I have elsewhere with the rice and whatever else. But yeah, back to trading though. One thing that I've done every so often, whenever the weather's not too bad, is make trades down here to these guys, Kikaspis, however you pronounce that. Damn it! Now what? These damn kids! I swear to God, they keep jumping into this place and they start drawing on stuff, and then get overheated. But anyway, down here it takes like I think both ways it's about 4 days worth. And sometimes when you go there and trade with one of your people that are authorized to trade with the place, sometimes you can get some pretty good stuff. At least that's been my experience. Like all of the components and sometimes some decent charged rifles and other things, you know, they can usually hook you up sometimes. But there's been a couple times when I would do that, load up about like 8 freaking yaks with tons of like furs and everything, and I'll go down there and it's like they won't have a single thing, or at least not anything that I need or want. So it's one of those things that you don't really want to have to do, because by the time you get done loading everything up and then get down there only to have that type of outcome, it kind of sucks. I swear with those global bulk traders, man, those things are always awesome. I don't think I've ever once had a global bulk trader come into orbit, trade with them, and have a bad experience from them. And it's my understanding, too, that with the later versions of this game, you can actually summon those. Which that would be pretty awesome. Hope you guys have vehicles and stuff. I hope they're running okay. I know that's been something that I've been kind of a little anxious about with my truck. Pulled out of my garage. I can't remember when. It was like last week. And I saw it was right after I did an oil change, and I saw that there was like a drop or two of oil underneath the truck as I was backing out. I thought to myself, what in the hell? So I kind of assumed that it was either the oil filter, because my make and model, you've got to screw the oil filter in horizontally, and that's a notorious place to sometimes have a little bit of seepage and stuff if the stupid thing isn't tight enough. And then of course there's the oil drain pan plug, which can sometimes seep too, especially if you don't have it screwed on tight enough. And me being how I am, whenever I do my oil changes, I always try to be careful with how tight I put those things, because I don't want it to. If you tighten that shit too tightly, man, it can cause problems. And so anyway, I told myself, well, okay, whenever I get back to work, I'll get under there and look at it and see what's going on. Because not only did I just do an oil change, but it was also during when I saw the oil, it was like a day after we had a really, really cold night, like, you know, down to like 0 temps and stuff like that. So I get under there and I'm looking around and stuff, and there's not really any drips coming down from either of those points. I'm thinking to myself, oh great, what does this mean? And after I look around, I see by the crank pulley where there's some past residue because I saw underneath around like the transmission housing area and the cross member area and stuff like that. I saw that there was old oil residue, which looked like, you know, whenever you're driving your truck or car or whatever and oil's coming down, it's going to fly back into certain areas because of the wind and stuff as you're driving. So I traced it all back to the crankshaft pulley. And usually I think what that means is that you might have the beginning of some sort of front main seal leak, which isn't something I'm very happy about. But I kid you not, I got on ChatGPT and I started asking questions about things like seepage and cold weather and things like that, because part of me was suspecting that it could have just been the cold weather that was causing seepage, because whenever it gets to like 10 degrees or below, all of these kinds of seals and stuff begin to kind of seep, because what happens is whenever your engine block gets cold, it essentially shrinks. It's not, it doesn't shrink super big, but it shrinks just enough where the clearances of those kinds of seals and things begin to open up just enough to where oil and like coolant and stuff like that can begin to kind of seep through. And I asked ChatGPT, I was like, you know, is there any chance that what I'm seeing here around the crank seal and stuff could be that? And it said yes. In all likelihood it was, because if it said that if it was an actual full-on leak, like if the crank seal was beginning to fail, you'd be seeing like not only more oil but more consistent oil leaking and stuff. And I don't see that at all. Even whenever I went out this morning, I think at most, if I saw anything, it might have been a teeny tiny drop, if that. And I couldn't even tell if it was an actual drop or if it was where one was at one point. Because whenever you wipe oil off of a concrete floor, it leaves a little bit of a almost kind of like a dampness to it. You know, it kind of looks like it. If the lighting isn't good, you can't really completely tell. But the point is that I don't think there was anything under it, and definitely nothing to like panic about. But I'd be lying though if I said that shit wasn't on my mind, because whenever something happens to my car or my truck, I always get anxious about it. Okay, these are the guys that came back from that ancient complex mission, which, by the way, was a little bit of a dry run, but we wound up getting some pretty decent amounts of steel out of it, at least, and some slate too, by the way. So that's, I guess, okay. Uranium too, I guess. But despite the oil, the little teeny tiny seepage thing, the truck's been running really well, which I'm really happy about. Hardly had any issues with it, man. I mean, there was one time, I think it was right before my vacation, when it wouldn't turn completely over in one of the grocery store parking lots, and it would crank and crank and crank, but it wouldn't turn over. And after dicking around with it for about 10 minutes, maybe 10, 15, somewhere around there, it finally cranked and turned over. And it's done that before. And I think there's something weird going on with the fuel delivery system. Like with my make and model, it's apparently it's a notorious issue to where the fuel rail begins to lose pressure if it sits for a certain amount of time. But the thing is that at that point I had just got done driving it, so I don't know if it's that or not. But it makes sense because it did that before I did this latest engine swap in my truck. And before I did there was one time a few years ago when the fuel pump that I did have, the original fuel pump, went out on me as I was coming into work one day, or at least into town, and I had to pull over because whenever your fuel pump goes, you're basically talking about everything else going with it, and power steering, everything. So I was sitting there, I was like mid-passing somebody, and all of a sudden these lights come up, they flare up in my dash, and I'm like, what the fuck is going on? And I lost power steering, I lost the radio, I lost fucking everything, and it took everything that I had to kind of safely get over. I put my blinkers on, got over, pulled off into a cemetery a cemetery drive-through, which in a way is kind of ironic if you think about it. Uh, but to make a long story out of that, I had to call somebody to come tow it into a shop, and they replaced the fuel pump because I guess the fuel pump went out. And I always kind of wondered if whenever they did that work, if there was something that they did wrong or maybe overlooked or something, because every so often with the truck that I have now, there's an every so often situation where you'll get done driving it, or else you'll go to start it and it'll act like it's cranking, but just won't turn over. And you'll have to fuck around with it for about 10 or 15 minutes sometimes, but it always winds up eventually starting if you stay at it. It's just the weirdest damn thing, man. And I've always kind of been suspicious that it had something to do with that fuel pump swap. But besides that, though, besides that occasional thing with the starting and this, what I suspect to be cold temperature seepage, my stupid little truck, man, she's running like a sewing machine. And it's been a while since I've started my car, too. I'm going to have to get out there at some point to start the car up just to get the fluids to kind of circulate and get the battery charged back up. But man, I just hate winter, man. It's always, there's always something that goes on, you know, something that breaks or stuff starts leaking or fucking whatever. It's always winter and summer, man. The extreme sides of the weather spectrum. Let me see here. How many toxic waste packs down do we have? Should be looking pretty good on that, I think. 314, so we're not too bad. I think we might be done loading another batch up, though, too. Still being loaded up. We're getting there. I've mentioned this before in previous videos, but basically what I'm trying to do is I'm loading 8 of these up, and whenever I get done loading them, I shoot them off out to here. This place right here. And sometimes it takes about 3 or 4 times to do that before the Koosh people wind up raiding me. And I'm doing that intentionally this time so that I can take some of them as hostage and then sacrifice them into that rip scanner thing so that I can start making those fabric cores. But it hasn't happened yet. I'm not really sure what's going on there. But I'm gonna. What I'm trying to do though is make another load up, and then shoot them out there to try to entice them to come out and try to start some shit with me. Because unfortunately in this game, there's not really any other way I think to make the fabric wars, and I'm sure shit not sacrificing my own colonists. So gotta take some guys that mean to do me harm. realized that we had some slaughtered things just kind of hanging out in here. Let's take that to the kitchen. Yeah, because if you don't get those stupid carcasses out of there, it winds up resulting in that lung rot or whatever it is that it's called. Yeah, see, like right here, I think there's one that's beginning to... Actually, let me see here. Yeah, damn it. So now that's going to start rotting and... Find somebody that can do hauling. Probably too, I guess. I guess it was just the stench that had to get filtered out. Sometimes you see that little cloud, you know, whenever something's rotting. This game, man, I swear to God, I've lost so much time on this game. It's a fun game, too. When you first start playing this game, man, it pisses you off because it'll do some sort of shit that you don't understand or and technically doesn't make sense, but once you play the game, you realize how it operates and you realize, well, okay, I gotta do that. It took me a while to get to the point where I don't want to, like, break my mouse with it. It's a fun game, though. Very fun game. One thing I'd like to see them do at some point in the future is, I don't know, man, find some sort of way to incorporate better intelligence with how the other worlds, like towns and cities and stuff, operate. Because one thing that you, like, for example, let me show you this. So, this is my place right here. And you know, you've got all of these different spots and everything. And the thing that gets a little irritating is the fact that none of that stuff out there, none of it changes. None of it evolves. None of it, like, you don't, like, get dragged into certain kinds of squabbles between different towns, or there's not really any kind of clear indication of things like trade routes or different kinds of settlements. Like, you know, we obviously have the opposing faction stuff, like right here, and then you've got the more or less ally type stuff, and then you have the occasional mechanator complex or ancient complex type thing. But that's about it, man. You know, nothing ever changes with this stuff. And so what I'd love to see in future versions of this game is make it to where you might have one opposing faction that's trying to go on some sort of, like, military campaign to conquer more land, and as that happens, you begin to see their territory expand, and likewise with your colony, you can expand your colony to not just be just the one place here, but in using some sort of like game model of some kind, you can uh, populate more colonies in little areas, almost kind of like almost kind of similar, I guess, to Civ or whatever that game is, where it's like Civilization, where you're expanding your territories and things like that. I'd like to see something like that happen and establish trade routes, establish allies, form your own entire nation, whatever. Because it's just too vacant, man. I mean, or at least it's not necessarily vacant. It's just that it's too static. Because if I was to go over here, take these guys out, and maybe even go as far as taking some of my allies out just for the hell of it, you wouldn't see anything come back. You know, it's almost as if you would be killing off your entire planet. And I mean, there's just so much potential in this game as far as like macro dynamics are concerned. You know, because it's focusing solely mostly on the micro dynamics, where you get to zone in on these individual colonists. You know, focus on these buildings, focus on the things that your fabrication bench produces, and that shit is awesome. Don't get me wrong. You know, I love focusing on how to grow your crops or how to feed your livestock and all that kind of stuff. It's awesome stuff. But there's just that other bigger level of development too that I think is lacking in this game, where you know there's not really anything that's going on around here. There's not any ongoing developments. I mean, you've got these places that are out there, and you can somewhat interact with them, but there's just an entire amount of additional gameplay that has potential in this game that's lacking right now. Like, imagine going to war with a I don't know, something, and like strategizing, you know, the globe around your ongoing campaign against whoever your opposition would be. Because if you could do stuff like that, then you would have a completely different dynamic of gameplay throughout this whole entire area alone. Because, like, for example, if these guys right here, let's get a different one. The Koosh people. Okay, so the Koosh people are constantly raiding my place, or at least they do a lot. Whenever I jettison those stupid toxic waste packs out there into the ether, they have enough of it and they want to come and take me out. Fine. Where's their fucking boundary? You know, where's the overlay that says, okay, this is Koosh's territory, so we got to be careful with that, and if we want to take them out, then what do we got to do to take them out? And do they have defenses in their nation anywhere, or little small towns that I could take out one by one? You know, there's just all sorts of different things there that you could explore with things like artificial intelligence or whatever, because I think that would take this game to another completely different level. And I think there's some stuff like that where modules are concerned. I've done a little bit of research on some of that stuff, and I guess there's one module, for example, that makes it to where some of those NPC colonies and stuff, it adds some layers of development, I think, with the kind of stuff I'm talking about. But in my mind, I mean, I think that stuff should be in the core. I don't like having to download a bunch of fucking modules just to get what I think should be some level of basic gameplay. But I'm hoping though that the dudes that are behind this game, they realize some of these kinds of things, and through time they'll fix some of it. And I'm betting they will, because there's too much to gain from incorporating that type of stuff. Well, anyway, guys, I think UFC's started, and I'm gonna go ahead and get off here and call it a video. Again, I hope you guys like watching this. I know it's kind of boring or whatever, but I like to think that there's a little bit of a different type of value in this type of video, because a lot of those videos that you see out there on YouTube about this type of game, a lot of them are kind of clipped up, and you know, you speed through a lot of it. And don't get me wrong, I like seeing that stuff sometimes, but every once in a while I also like to see a kind of video that's really into the weeds and doesn't skip anything too. And that's, in a way, that's kind of what this is supposed to be. If you like it, great. Share, like, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. You know how it goes. If not, then I'd still love to have your opinion on what it is that you would like to see in this. Maybe I can find a way to make it happen. But beyond that, though, I hope you guys stay warm, stay safe. If you're gonna travel, man, please be careful if you're in the area where all this storm crap's happening. When I came back home at around, I think it was around maybe 2, something like that. The roads hadn't really gotten that bad, but they were beginning. You could kind of see ice developing. So if you happen to go out and drive around and stuff, man, just please be careful because it's gonna get pretty bad tonight, I think. So anyway, hope you stay safe, and I will see you whenever I see you. You guys take care.